and we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Aloni, and I'm with Schneps Media. Schneps Media is the largest local media company in New York Metro. We publish over 70 newspapers, magazines, websites, webinars, podcasts, and events, and do so throughout Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Westchester, Long Island, and Philadelphia. Today, we're thrilled to bring you Charter Schools A to Z, why you want to apply. And we're going to hear from the experts all about charter schools, how to know if they're right for your child, and we're actually going to walk you through the steps of applying. It's not scary. And we're also going to learn about the charter school virtual fair that's going to take place on March 20th, where you can get even more information. So I am thrilled to introduce today's panelists. First up, I want to introduce you to Martí. He is the Director of Marketing and Communications for the New York City Charter School Center. Welcome, Marcos. Please tell our attendees a bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, yes, my name is Marcos. So glad, thank you, Elizabeth. So glad to be here remotely with all y'all and talking about a little bit of what we do. As a Director of Marketing Communications from the New York City Charter School Center, my job is to let everyone know about charter schools and that they have options. And so my team spends quite a bit of time and energy just ensuring that families in New York City know that they might have charter schools in their neighborhood that they might want to check out. What is it that they offer? What is it that might make them special? And just reminding families that it's up to them. It's up to them to decide families are the ones that will know what's best for their children. And no charter school, no family is the same. No two families are the same. No two charter schools are the same. So my job is to let people know what they're about and how to apply and all that stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcos. Happy to have you here. Next, I'm very happy to introduce Randall Iserman, who's the Director of School Supports. Randall, say hello and share about yourself with our attendees.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Elizabeth. We've never been referred to as phenomenal experts before, so I feel like we have a lot to live up to at this stage. But we like to think of ourselves as pretty strong charter advocates, and we do know our schools pretty well. Just so that you all know, what we do in my department is we help schools make sure that they are operating at their sort of maximum capacity and their ability to serve kids as well as possible by helping them make sure that they're using their resources wisely and managing their systems well, so all of their operational side. We also do a lot of work for the sector as a whole to ensure that it has integrity and that it makes it easy for families to navigate the 267 charter schools in New York City. Wow. So there are options beyond almost any family's thinking, and we're really glad now to have an opportunity to show you how you can learn to navigate your way through that.
Thank you, Randall. That sounds phenomenal to me.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get started at square one. What exactly is a charter school, and how are they different from regular schools?
I'll take a stab at it, and Randall, if you want to jump in. So charter schools are public schools. There's no entrance fee. There is no admission tests. There's no interview. There's no screening or anything. They are public schools funded by public dollars. The difference that makes a charter school, the difference between a charter school and a district school, is that they get to operate a little bit more autonomously. And they get to operate outside of the local school district. So in New York City's case, from outside of the Department of Education. There's still a lot of collaboration. There's still a lot of things in reporting that happens together. But by part in general, they get to decide on what their curriculum looks like. They might want to offer, how long their days are. What offerings they do after school. How long are their class periods. And so they're more autonomous, hence the word charter. Into how they teach and then how they structure. Many charters, they're still accountable to the state and their authorizers. They still have to meet certain state standards and do all those requirements in order to be licensed, right, and authorized as a charter school. But in terms of their structure, their development, their teacher hiring, their curriculum, all that they get to do autonomously.
Terrific.
That's a great kickoff, Marcos. Let me just add that the charter law was written originally with a couple of things in mind. Number one, families, particularly in certain areas, in certain high needs parts of the city or parts of the state for that matter, deserved to have options and choices in the same way that folks who lived in more affluent parts of the city or parts of the state had. And charter schools provide an option, a choice for those families who may find that their district schools are not adequate for their needs, or that they may be perfectly adequate, but not a perfect fit for their students. And because charter schools are also built on the idea that using that autonomy, that independence that is true, all charters have the independence and autonomy to create their programs. It means that there's an opening for a lot of innovation. As Marcos pointed out, maybe about the length of the school year, the length of the school day, the way that the classrooms are set up, the way that the instruction is managed. There are all kinds of things there. And there are also opportunities now for the schools to specialize a little bit and become really powerful engines of educational achievement in science or technology or in engineering and mathematics or in the arts and humanities, which is not to say that they don't offer a full range of all the things that a student needs to succeed going forward into high school and into college. But often the schools will take a particular lens, and that's another way for a family to have options.
Terrific. I mean, that really kind of segues nicely into the conversation I wanted to have about why should or why would a parent consider a charter school? I mean, obviously, because there's an opportunity for, it's almost like in college, you get a major where you're still getting the full, range of education, but you're able to focus on perhaps areas where your child excels or has interest. Can you share more with us about, why a parent would or should think about a charter school?
Go ahead.
I'll go on that one.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
All right. There are lots and lots of reasons. Probably one of the strongest reasons is that across the city, and we'll focus for the moment on New York City, across the city, resources and the quality of the district schools is very uneven. And a big movement for the charter sector as a whole has been to build alternative schools in those neighborhoods that have the highest need, whether they are the schools are failing because they've just not been resourced correctly or they're not well run. But often it's in areas of the city where there's greater level of poverty or other family and social issues that create a need for schools that are often smaller, often much more personalized in the sense that the teachers and staff, because there's a smaller school, know all the students and their families extremely well and are able therefore to serve those families and serve their communities in a much more intensive and personalized or customized kind of way. The idea here is that as Marcos pointed out, no two families are quite exactly the same, and certainly no two communities are exactly the same or have the same needs. And charter schools, because they're not necessarily part of a giant bureaucracy, which has to have some central controls, are able to fit the way that they operate their educational program to some of the specific needs of that community. So for example, you might find that in a school in a neighborhood with a large Black American population, that school has made a big effort to make the whole African American heritage and Black history not be a month, but be infused throughout the entire curriculum year. Likewise, in areas where there is a high immigrant population or where we have a lot of families for whom English is not their first language, you'll find that the schools have built into their everyday activity how to serve those kids and how to make sure that their social and emotional lives are taken care of and that their classrooms are culturally responsive to the needs of families for whom sort of a standard issue liberal arts education may not be as accessible if there weren't these other supports.
Terrific. Those are really important things to think about for sure. And help us to understand how important these opportunities are. So when you're looking at your own child, and what should a parent consider when they're looking at these different charter schools to be able to make the right fit? I mean, obviously location is one, but beyond that, there's so many special things these schools offer. What would you recommend parents think about when looking at a school?
I'm gonna jump in, and then Randall, if you want to continue. Obviously, it's part of the beauty of the charter school system, or the charter school sector, if you will, is that there is different offerings for people, and so we don't necessarily, it's not necessarily a realistic expectation in our minds, right, to think that a district school, one school, can provide all things to all people. And so a lot of what a parent might be considering themselves is anything from what is, like Randall was saying, what is the focus that I would like my child to have in their school. Sometimes some families, I can tell you what some of our families have told us that they're looking at. Some charter schools in general, will offer longer school days than district schools, and so a lot of families are looking for a longer school day for their students. Some families are looking for a really big relationship, or very strong relationship with their teachers. Not that they can't get that at district schools, but when considering a school, that's something that you might think that charter schools are also very good at. That we had a parent yesterday, we did a Facebook Live, and we had a parent let us know. She's like, I feel like I'm in a relationship with my teachers. I get to know what how my child is doing. I get a call saying they're doing great. I get a call saying, hey, they didn't do so great today. And so some parents are looking for that type of interaction, or that type of involvement in their education as well. And so in terms of what they should be looking for, I would say we normally recommend a couple of things, but it's really up to the parents, is what kind of instruction curriculum they do. If you have a student with a disability, or a student that is part of a special population, how is it that the school is going to approach how is it the school is going to approach the needs of that student? We would also ask, how long are your school days, and how is your curriculum structured? And then lastly is, I would also say, how is my student going to be evaluated, right? Like, what's the evaluation process? What is it, how does it look like? And so with that, it can come like class size. What's the ratio of teachers to students? How are they going to get graded? How are we going to get involved? How can we help? And so those are kind of four, it's a lot of things, but those are kind of four different buckets, that I would recommend you talk about. I don't know if, Randall, you have anything else to offer.
I do have something else to offer. Marcos is absolutely right. All parents want the best for their kids. And the more you know, and the more you actually sort of go out and study and do research, the better you're going to be able to make that kind of a decision. But in the end, to use the cliche, at the end of the day, every parent, every guardian will want to feel comfortable that that school is the right place for their student. And yes, there's a lot of data involved in that, but there's also the sort of X factor of these people feel like a family, or these people feel like they understand what matters to my community, what matters to me, and what matters to my student. And that's especially the case when you have students who either have special learning needs, or students who have more trouble in their family lives, or in their communities, or other things like that. Or if you have a student who, for whatever reason, has had an interrupted education, or things like that. But for the most part, you'll find that there's a lot of data research, but then there's also just a lot of sort of emotional contact, and where you feel like, yeah, this feels like the place where my student is going to thrive. My child is going to have a good time, as well as be challenged.
Really a good point. So it's, yes, you want to look at these buckets, and you want to do all that consideration, but you can't ignore your intuition when you go somewhere and you meet, you get a feeling that, what, this is right for my child and our family. We have a question from Andrea. She wants to know, during the admissions process, it's difficult to know the better charter schools to guide families to. Is there a guide or book that we can request for next year? She said rating seems to be very different according to different websites. Now, Don't we have something coming up that can help with that?
So we have two things actually that can help with that. I would say that the best way to get know if the school is the right fit for your child is by being able to talk to that school, right? And so we have a list of several tools that can help you with that. First of all, on Saturday we're having our virtual charter fair, as Elizabeth mentioned. This is our second one this year. And where it's a virtual platform where you could get to think about it as like a job fair or a school fair, right? But all online. And so you can visit virtual booths for each school participating. I think yesterday I was told we're up to like 200 different schools that are going to be there. And so they'll have their brochures, they'll have their information, they'll have videos, they'll have even virtual tours of their facilities. And so don't miss it. It's from 10 to 2 on Saturday. And so I would love to talk a little bit more about that later. Secondly is we have the Common Online application, and while you might not be ready to apply just yet, I bring that up because in the Common Online application, when you make and build a profile, you will also be able to find out which schools are close to you based on your address, and so that might be a good way to kind of first narrow down, what are the schools that are around you, so you can make a list for when you. And the Common Online app can be found at charternyc.org. You can go to charternyc.org. There's information on our virtual fair there. There's information on charter schools. There's information on the Common Online application there. And the third tool that you can also find at charternyc.org is our School Finder. And while our School Finder is this tool that you can put in your address, you can put it your community school district, which you might not know, but there's also a lookup there, or you can put the name of your neighborhood, and it'll show you what charter schools are in that neighborhood. And once you click, we do have a little bit more of a robust profile with data on that school. Data from demographics to, testing data. Now, admittedly so, because of the pandemic, testing data is going to be a little outdated because of testing and comparison, etc. And I think that a lot of that you'll find that everywhere, just because testing has been something that has kind of one of the many things that have been thrown for a loop. But you'll be able to find there more information on a particular school, like I said, the demographics, their school culture, their information, and so those are three tools that I would give families to go and find out more and make the judgment yourself. What's a good school? What's the best school for your child?
Terrific. Thank you.
So, as usual, like any good marketing and communications guy, he's covered like a whole range of things all in practically in one breath. But that's the way Marcos rolls. So that's cool. I would like to go back just a little bit and address, I think it's Andrea's question. And that is, when it comes to what's a better charter school and what the ratings are like, it's absolutely true. Everyone rates schools on a whole number of elements, and some are very, very much based on test scores. And so if that really matters to your family for whatever reason, then that would be the way to go. Others use a wider range of measures, including how the school feels and how well the school keeps kids involved in things and finds their interests and addresses their individual needs. That would be another way of rating schools. I think to Marco's point, one of the things we're a little reluctant to say it's like this rating system or that rating system is a great way to rate any kind of school, whether it's charter school or district school or independent school or a faith-based program. It's much more about what matters to your family and whether you feel that that school is going to meet your children's needs. Because that's one of the joys of all of this kind of more autonomous and independent and innovative work, is that it's not always just about test scores, or it's not always just about what high schools kids get into. A lot of what makes a school really successful for a student is how it feels, what are the things that engage that student. It's like, my kid hated math, so we had to make sure that the school that he was in had really creative ways to get him interested in numerical ideas and numerical thinking, because he was convinced he was bad at it. And he's fine. And he got through it because we had a good school for him. I would also like to address, I think it was Gerard's question about If you live in a particular neighborhood, are you restricted to that area for applying to charter schools? And the answer is no. I want to be clear that if you live in the same community school district, that is to say, within the whole 5 boroughs, there are 32 districts, which roughly align to neighborhood borders, but not completely, that you have a priority seat in those local schools, but you are not limited to those schools. So many families actually look at schools near their home and schools maybe near where they work and choose either of those as the top priorities that they want to apply to, knowing that they still have ready access to those schools in the event they need to get to pick up their children or other kinds of things like that.
Terrific, thank you. That answered actually a couple of questions because a couple of people asked.
Yeah, I see them coming in.
So that's terrific. So kind of going back to that, you know, if a parent is interested in sticking to their neighborhood, how can a parent learn about what charter schools are in their neighborhood? Let's say that that's like their number one priority is in their neighborhood.
So if the priority is what's closest to me, as Marcos pointed out, you could put in your address into the school finder, either at the New York City Department of Education or into the one that we've already recommended to you that's on our website, or into the create yourself a family profile and use the Common Online app. And if you'd like, let me give you a quick walk through the Common app right now so you can see how easy it is to have access to all the charter schools that might be of interest to you. Let me just be sure I'm set up the right way here.
Perfect.
And I will share a couple of screenshots with you.
That's great. So we can actually see what it would feel like when you actually go online.
Exactly. All right, let me be sure. How does that look? Can you see what that looks like?
That is perfect.
Great. That is the landing page of the Common Online application. As you can see, there's a whole opportunity here to do some additional research. There's also a calendar that tells you what schools are doing in their own environment to let you know about what's going on in their schools. And of course, you'll be able to access this when you come and visit us at the virtual charter fair on Saturday between 10 and 2. Okay, Marcos, that was my first one. I'll keep plugging away. But it's a very easy 3 or 4 step process to use this application. You can access it either with an email address or a mobile number. So you are not dependent on having easy internet access where you live or whatever it might be, because you could start it with your mobile phone number. You build a password, you create a family account. The next thing that happens is you set up your family information. Very simple, as you can see, it's menu driven. You then identify the child or children in your household, because you can use this same account to apply for all the children in your household. There are 1, 2, 3, as many as there might be. You then, and as you can see, we sort of set up a little test case here in order to allow you to see what we're talking about. We set up two siblings in one family. We're going to set up something for little Vaughn here, who's a kindergartner. We're looking for a kindergarten somewhere near this address in the Grand Concourse. And so the first thing that happens after I click on the next button there is this map comes up, and here's our address. And here are pins dropped for all the schools that are immediately apparent. Now, this is like any other Google type map. You can scroll it up and down, move it around so you can see the schools that are further away from home. But maybe if I'm following along a southern route, because that's where my office is, I would be able to see that. The next part of that, right below that map, you get a list of all the schools accepting kindergarten applications that tells you what grades that school has in total. This one, for example, is a K-8. This one's a K-5. This one is currently a K-4 because it's not completely built out yet, but it's growing to include other grades later. This one's only a half mile from my house. And as you can see, they get a little bit further out. It essentially spirals out. I can just click on all the schools that are of interest to me, and that's all there is to it. I hit the submit button, And at the end of that, I'll get a confirmation emailed directly to that email or texted to my mobile number that tells me everything I need to know about where I am and all of the applications made for that first child. And then I go through the application process, but not the account process again for each child. So once again, I'm particularly proud of this part right here, where it really helps families find this. You'll also find that in the list, you can go straight to the school's website to get to know more information. So you can learn more about the school from this, from our finder, from our virtual fair, and even from the Department of Education's own school finder.
Terrific. That makes it very easy, and it really simplifies things. Zoe has a question, and I guess, other people who may have a similar question. Do you know what percentage of Asian families are in the current New York City charter school system, is the question from Zoe. But also, are you able to search that across different nationalities or cultural backgrounds?
That's a really interesting question that I have to be completely honest, we've never really addressed before. We maintain and we stand on the fact that all schools accept all students, and most schools you will find that most schools have a population very much driven by the neighborhoods that they're in and the immediate communities around them. So without wanting to make anything too specific, downtown charter schools tend to have a higher Asian population. Charter schools in Queens tend to have a higher Asian American or Asian immigrant population. Schools in Harlem, less so. And that's not because they're not welcome, and it's not because they wouldn't be accepted there. It has more to do with where that applicant population is coming from. Anything you would add to that, Marcos?
Yeah, I was going to add that. I mean, yes, we can give a number, but the thing is, like, it all depends on the school. So while some schools might have something as low as like 3%, and I can tell you sector-wide, this is part of my job, right? Like, we did see an increase in Asian enrollment this year by 16%. But that also, again, depends on, like, the neighborhood and, there's people moving around in New York City, how neighborhoods are changing. Charter schools are closer to particular neighborhoods than others. And so I think that it would be a better approach if that was something the parent was looking for, to ask a particular school, just because it's hard to, number is not going to be representative of every single school.
And let me just, Nancy, we sympathize that it's hard to find charter schools in your area. There hasn't been the same kind of demand in parts of Queens as there has been demand for charter schools in parts of Brooklyn, Upper Manhattan, and the South Bronx. And so there are fewer, although there's a cluster in Long Island City and Astoria. There's a small group in Elmhurst and not so many in Flushing. But it's more a question of where the demand has been and where the community need has been found, because a lot of charter schools, and we are currently more than half of charter schools were founded by local communities, whether it's local faith-based organizations or communities that felt that the district schools in their area weren't adequate to the needs of students. And that led to a lot of schools being founded in areas where there was the greatest need in those respects. We always encourage folks to get to know better other neighborhoods where there are still opportunities for charter schools, but we don't open them. So we need community folks and others to decide that, yeah, we need more schools in Corona or Elmhurst or other parts of the city.
So how would you recommend a parent advocate for that? Oh, sorry, Marcos.
No, I was gonna say, we help schools get started, but we don't start them ourselves.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, as a parent, let's say, if Nancy, because Nancy was asking that question because she was disappointed there weren't a lot by her in Corona, a lot of charter schools. Is there any recommendation you can make for parents to advocate for charter schools? I mean, is there
absolutely
a process for that?
Absolutely. probably the strongest reason for citing a charter school or even for founding a charter school at all is community demand. And when new teams and interested parties, and there are lots of really dedicated, committed, and energetic, I say young because from my perspective, they are young folks, are interested in starting new schools, one of the critical parts of determining where that school will be and whether that application for a charter will be accepted is how well has that team embedded what it is doing and responded to the needs of a local community. Absolutely, it is one of the 2 or 3 most important aspects of a new charter application. But that means you got to know the neighborhood really well. And it's one of the reasons that I would encourage, if families feel that there's a need for charter schools in their neighborhood, you can certainly let us know. And we'll be happy to make sure that folks who want to start a charter school know that there's demand for it in certain neighborhoods. But it's also valuable to just become more politically active in your own area, to talk to your community board, to talk to others in your neighborhoods, and find out if your feeling about it is shared by a broad enough part of the neighborhood that you reach a critical mass, if you will. Let's face it, there are lots and lots of political aspects to the charter school movement because education politics is fraught with all kinds of volatility, particularly right now as we transition from a Republican to a Democratic administration in Washington, as we have transitioned from a Republican Senate to a Democratic Senate in the state legislature. And the impact of both teachers unions and progressive advocates, and I don't put them in exactly the same bucket, but they both tend to advocate for let's make the district schools better rather than opening charter schools. And we would argue that that's not an either or proposition. We would argue that a strong charter sector and a strong district sector support one another, reinforce one another, and provide both opportunities and choices for families. And in theory, at least, what we learn in charter schools and what we can develop and understand from the really strong central bureaucracy, because there are real advantages to a strong central bureaucracy and oversight from a central authority, reinforce one another and make for better schools for all the kids in the neighborhood. But educational politics are volatile. Right. And so you will hear politicians, and we like to say we don't know why they've taken the position that charter schools are not necessarily a good thing, but the myth is that it privatizes the schools, and it doesn't. We want to make sure that we dispel some myths, as Marcos said at the beginning, that charter schools are publicly funded, they're open to all kids, they're open to the students first and foremost who are siblings of the kids already in those schools, but to all the schools, all the children in that neighborhood, and then by extension to all the kids in the city, if there are enough seats available. And in every case, a charter school, if they receive more applications than they have available seats in that class or in that grade level, they hold a lottery in the first week of April, usually, maybe a little bit later in April, but generally in the first week of April, in order to guarantee that there's no favoritism as far as which students get those seats. And many schools, because they want to serve the most at-risk population, and they want to serve students who have the most greatest needs, make a special priority also for students with learning disabilities, or they make a specific priority for students who come from an economically disadvantaged household. They actually actively recruit students who need this opportunity the most. Andrea.
I'll answer. I can answer Andrea's question. I want to add a couple things. And so, in terms of the fair, there's Andrea's question about the fair. The fair will only have charter schools in it. However, I did see another question saying that in the DOE portal, you will find both charter schools and district schools. If you look for the DOE school finder, at the fair, you will find charter schools. Charter schools are Some schools are what we lovingly call indies, or independent schools, and they're one school. They have a smaller team usually, but they're just as good. They bring really really good value. They're a team that is particularly specializing in a particular area, or they believe in a particular special sauce, like we call it earlier. And so then we also have networks, and so you might have heard some of the networks of schools, which they will have also just different types of schools in different neighborhoods, but they're all under the umbrella of one larger nonprofit organization. And so they will be, and just to name a few, you've heard of Uncommon Schools or KIP or Success Academies. Those are networks. But there's also independent schools. And some of those independent schools might have like one or two locations that they might be a part of. To reiterate something that Randall said, by law, there can be no private charter schools authorized in New York City anymore. There's no such thing as a for-profit,
Right.
a school that is authorized. And so again, a lot of it to that privatization myth. Also, by law, when there's more applicants than seats available in a charter school, that lottery that Randall was talking about has to take place. And so those are audited, and those are make sure that they're fair and everything. Some schools make a huge party out of it. Some schools broadcast it online, but it's something. It's a very we find it's a very transparent process in that regard. And then the last thing that I want to say too is someone asked about the deadline for the fall application. So different schools may have different deadlines themselves. However, for the Common Online app, Randall, do you want to talk about the deadline for the Common Online application?
So we advise all families to apply to all the schools that they're interested in prior to April 1st. April 1st is the legal earliest date that a school can close its application period. That's not to say that they all do. Some extend it to April 5th or April 10th or whatever it might be, but you'll find in early April, schools will be closing their application period and beginning to run their lotteries to make sure that they can start offering seats and letting families know that they have a seat in that school if they have one. I'd like to just make sure that we're really clear for Andrea's sake. The FAIR and the Common App are specifically for charter schools. They do not include district school application process, or they won't be represented there, because this is for us to make sure that you know all about the charter schools themselves. And the district also has its own choice programs. For that, you'll want to go to schools.nyc.gov to learn more about how the districts run their choice programs for kindergarten. Once you are in a charter school, you're in the charter school. So if your student is accepted in kindergarten, that student has a right of return all the way through the entire program. If it's a K-5 program, straight through 5th grade, all the way to 8th grade, if it's a K through 8. So you do not reapply. If you are accepted in 1 year, you are automatically considered the right to return to continue all the way through that school. And I just wanted to stress also that that we do give families priority in their neighborhood, but that doesn't preclude you applying to schools in other neighborhoods or in other CSDs. It's just a matter of how many seats will be available and whether or not they will be filled up from their neighborhood before they get to those who are applying from outside their neighborhood.
And there's plenty of people that in schools. I don't want to necessarily paint a picture that if you don't live in that neighborhood, you have no chance on getting in, because that is not the case. It all depends. It's not the case. There's plenty of people and then once you move into a different neighborhood, you can still, if you move to a different neighborhood, you don't have to necessarily, if it's not what you want, take your child out of that school, because you've moved now either.
We have a couple of more specific COVID type questions.
Yeah.
And do charter schools follow the same COVID-19 testing procedures and closures and regulations, et cetera, they are subject to the same rules from the state ed department on 4 critical points. We use the same assessments. That is to say, we use the state exams and the regents for students to graduate. So you have easy comparison with districts in terms of that kind of outcome. We follow the same civil rights, of course, which means that no student is discriminated against under any of the protected ethnic, racial, gender, religious, all of those civil rights categories. We have the same safety rules to follow, which is to say we submit the same safety plans and building response and emergency planning as any district school, and health regulations. So yes, we are not bound by the Department of Education's specific rules, but we are bound by the same rules issued by the state ed department and the state and city departments of health. So you'll find that charter schools are in some cases doing the same testing, in some cases doing more, and in many cases, actually, because we are not bound by the union memo of understanding, the UFT rules that bind the hands a little bit of district schools, you'll find that often charter schools have made it a requirement for teachers and staff to return to work in person that they're vaccinated. There was, if I'm not mistaken, was there a question about vaccinations as well?
There was a question about whether or not students will be returning in September to in-person learning.
So right now, again, part of what makes a charter school special is their ability to determine that themselves within their community. And so even you might have heard this year, when district schools open, some charter schools open, some stayed remote, some did a hybrid. And so I could confidently say, and Randall, correct me if I'm wrong, but most schools are aiming for an in-person reopening in September if they haven't already. Maybe a lot of schools have already now, as of March, opened in person. There's a few schools that, because again, they're making decisions themselves, so maybe because of their facilities or where they're located or a particular neighborhood that they're in, they might have chosen to extend or shorten the remote learning this year. But across the education spectrum, I think nationally the conversation is that it's good for children to be in school, and so that is the goal. Schools are taking the necessary precautions, be it for weekly testings of a percentage of their population that is in person, that is students, teachers, and staff. Socially distant classrooms where depending on the space in the classroom, how many people can fit there, how far away are the desks, how far away are the stations, et cetera, et cetera. Also, they have sanitation stations and the free distribution of PPE materials. And so, yes, Stanislava, yeah.
We all agree. We all agree.
Yeah. So there's distribution of PPE, so schools have outfitted their buildings with maybe those plexiglass in areas that they need. They need to distribute masks and stuff like that. So all schools are taking that into account, and some depending, because their buildings are different, right? Some have different measures that they need to take over others. But yes, legally they all have to abide by the rules that the State Department of Health has put forth. And then we find out that if there's usually, and this is not like a hard and fast rule, but we usually find out that if there's someone that goes above and beyond, most people follow, and they also go above and beyond, because everyone wants to make sure that students are safe and healthy.
Take a breath, man.
Yeah, I know.
So let me just say, from a little bit less of a communications perspective, we anticipate all of our schools are working very hard to make sure their staffs are fully vaccinated, that they have all of the safety measures in place. But we're also monitoring what's happening with the CDC and with the State Department of Health on a regular basis. In fact, that's one of the biggest things that my department's been doing for the last year, is helping schools monitor those changes as we learn more and more about how the pandemic has progressed, and the fact that it's increasingly clear that children are not a strong transmission vector, that they are less apt to become ill, that the more that the adults around them are vaccinated, the less likely it is that there's a problem of transmission. Whether or not 6 feet or 3 feet or 5 feet or whatever that number is becomes sort of the new norm. All of our schools are working very hard to make sure that the maximum safety based on the best available current science has been put in place so that the maximum number of students can be in the building as they choose, because there will still be available to families who have specific needs and our fear about it because of family members or because of other issues in their household. The remote option will still be available. It won't be encouraged. It won't be like, oh yeah, we're going to do this like every other week and make all the kids come to school 3 days and go home 3 days and da da da. But it will still be there. And we want to make sure that families know that there's not going to be the pressure that you must decide to do one thing or another, because quite frankly, we have to wait and see how the vaccination continues to roll out, whether we are continuing to be as safe as we want to be, and that there isn't yet another surge in the summer because people get a little lax. This is what happened to us over the holidays. Schools that had opened, some had to shut down parts of them. And that's the other thing that I think you're going to find will happen much more in the fall, is you won't have wholesale school shutdowns. You may have a particular cohort of students that goes into quarantine in order to keep the adults and their families safe, because the staff in the schools will be less apt to be at risk. But flexibility will be still a key. Agility and being nimble will continue to be important. But yeah, the goal is as many kids whose families want them to be in school will be in school as much of the week as is humanly possible, given the rules that we'll have in September.
We had a really good question from Amabel Cruz about students with IEPs and ICT classrooms. And so charter schools, many I don't want to say all because we can't speak for all 267, but many of them do have an ICT model in their schools. So for those of you, ICT stands for Integrated Co-Teaching Model. And so we also, as part of our organization, we have our daughter organization, if you will, called the Collaborative for Inclusive Education, and we certainly recommend ICT models for schools. Those folks will be also at the virtual charter fair, so if you have any questions on special education or special populations, they will have a booth and will help you advocate for your child and answer all the questions as well. And so many do where, and for those of you who don't know, an ICT classroom is that certain students require a certain number of certain ratio of student to teacher ratio for them, and so we'll have a 2 teachers rather than 1 in a classroom. But then there's 1 teacher that is more focused or on particular students, so it allows to bring down the student teacher ratio and where students need it. I find, and I do school visits all the time, so does Randall, a lot of schools also have breakout models, right? Well, they'll do stuff as a big group and then they'll spread out into smaller groups. And so different teachers will be able to connect with students that might need a particular help or anything. If you have any questions about students with disabilities, students with special education, English language learners, any special population, the best thing is to ask the school directly, because again, no 2 schools are the same, but I can say that most schools do offer an ICT classroom. Also, in terms of busing, again, most schools that have a need for busing will provide busing. Randall, this is more your area of expertise and the Department of Education. And just because there are some, yeah, go ahead. I'm just saying I don't know all the intricacies of busing except for yes, it's available for. But I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add.
So, if you come to the virtual fair on Saturday for no other reason than to visit with our friends at the Collaborative for Inclusive Education, you will get an education from the most passionate advocates for students who have disabilities, who are English language learners or multilingual learners, or who are at risk in other ways. We like to think they're the best that there is.
They are.
They're incredibly passionate about it. If you come and you only visit that one booth and chat with Melissa and Alexandra and their team, it will have been a visit worthwhile. So let me just say, yes, there are integrated co-teaching classes, and generally you'll have a standard size class, 18, 20, 22 children, and 2 teachers, one of whom is specializing in making sure that students who need extra scaffolding or extra support are getting that support that is derived directly from their individual education plans, their IEPs. You'll also find that a number of schools have a team teaching model anyway and have it across their program because they just feel that all students, even those that don't have IEPs but maybe are at risk because they've started further behind than their peers, or they're not at grade level when they enter the school, or other things, that an additional educator in every room helps to make sure that kids stay engaged and nobody is left behind. And
or for kids that might be ahead of the cohort too, then they could
exactly. We have classrooms where that is equally the problem. And let's face it, in a standard classroom, the hardest thing to do is to be reaching the kids who are already a little ahead and the kids who are behind for whatever reason, the pace of the class. And when I say behind, it's not that the kid is behind, it's that the educational instruction, that student hasn't received what they need to be on what we'll call the target level. Yes, to the question about busing, if a student's IEP requires that a student needs to have busing to make sure that they can get to their proper classroom, yes, busing is provided. That's another one of the services that is integral between charter schools and the district schools, that busing is shared by all of them. In fact, busing is even available in independent schools. So if a child has an IEP that states she needs a bus to get to an independent or private school, the DOE provides busing for that. And in answer to your question, Stanislava, we are not dictated to by the DOE rule about school closures. I think you're going to find that the district is shifting that program a little bit anyway, as we know more. But no, charter schools, again, because they are more nimble and not dictated to by a giant bureaucratic rule, have been able to close down one cohort of students when they have an exposure, and to manage that more carefully so as not to interrupt the education of all the kids in the building because we might have gotten symptoms in one room or some such thing as that.
Fantastic. Wow. We could spend the entire day here with this information because you have so much wonderful information, but I do want to respect everyone's time. And I do want to remind everyone the virtual charter fair is this Saturday. So when he says Saturday, March 20th, it's this Saturday. So you can go to, I did share the link, virtualcharterfair.com. You can go there. It's Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. This program has been recorded. So, and you will get a link to that too, so you can share it with your community. You can watch it again if there are bits of this you missed, but really go to the virtual charter fair this Saturday because it will answer so many of your questions. Brianna, I don't know if we got to talk about the specific charter school that you were talking about, but you certainly will be able to address that at the virtual charter fair this Saturday.
So let me interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah.
You're doing a fantastic marketing job for us. Let me just say, we would love to see you all there. I'll be there. Marcus will be there. We'll be in a booth specifically set up by the Charter School Center that allows families, if you have a question or you're just like, how should I like, what should I be looking for? We're happy to talk to you. If you want to come and just talk to our friends from the collaborative, they'll have a booth set up, and we'll have also a site where we'll walk you through how to use the Common App if you need help with it. For us, the most important thing is that every family knows what their options are, has the easiest access to all the information that they would like to have to make a really informed and careful decision for their children, and that it's as easy as possible, because we know it's a huge project and a little fraught with fear that you're going to make a mistake, but don't worry, you'll be all right. Thank you, Elizabeth. So God, take it away. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, thank you. Thank you for really hand-holding us through this process. And I know there's gonna be more hand-holding. I wanna thank Randall and Marcos so much for providing all of this information. I know I've been seeing all these things from parents. Thank you so much. This is incredible information. So I appreciate it. I wanna thank all of our attendees for spending some time this morning to learn more about charter schools. I wish you only the best in finding the right school for your child and your family. I wish you all to stay safe and stay healthy. And we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar and at the Charter School Virtual Fair on Saturday.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. And Andrea, if you want a general info session, come and visit us at our booth and we'll be happy to answer all your questions.
Any other questions, they can also go to our Facebook and you can ask them there. Reach us through Facebook, NYC Charters. And we're very good at getting back to people there. So if you have anything else, certainly do it through there.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you again, Elizabeth. Great to talk to you.
You too. Bye-bye.